This is the Freedom Tapestry Project. Welcome back. We had a brief interruption and we're back. We were just on with Ben, and you can check out the previous episode. And we're going to be back on with Shaun here in a second. We will get on there. So we have Ballywell, which is our guest, Shaun Greene. You see that? Yes, Shaun Greene. Yes, Shaun Greene. And I am Aaron Jack. So there we go. It's all good. Hey, Samia. We're just going to get back on here. We're going to bring everybody back. We're going to have Shaun Greene talk about some AR, VR with everybody here. Welcome back for everybody who's tuning in later. Thank you. Check out the previous episode where Ben talks about what we're talking about today, because that's what's up. We're just going to send this out to a few people, use that little DM feature, and send it out. We're waiting for Shaun to get on here. Ink. I'm glad you love the ink. Hey, Ruba. We're waiting for Shaun to get on here, so if someone could send it out to Shaun, that would be helpful. Hey, Saeed. We can see if Ben gets here. We'll see. We'll wait for Shaun while we wait for Shaun to get back on here. Hey, there you go.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Ruba. Hey, do I look better now?
Oh, you're much better now. You're like 110% right now.
Great. And I just put all the books away. I was like, I was gonna put them away, but I figured we already did that part. But yeah, no, I think I did. You send a little DM to Shaun to Ballywell to make sure
I'm not sure, but we'll do that. We'll send him the little DM. If everybody wants to send a little DM out to their favorite friends who should check out the AR, VR.
Yeah, no, I'm really I don't know how much I broke up in the last one, but as I was saying, this is really fun and exciting because Shaun and I met at New York Comic Con when we were doing the Marvel panel with the AR, and there's a lot of stuff you guys can check out. The Masters of the Sun AR, TechCrunch did an article. Will and Apple and Tab all showcased it there. And I think it was on the Breakfast Club, and but it was really cool because it was the very first time there was a full comic book done in augmented reality with a soundtrack that Will did with Hans Zimmer, and all these amazing voice actors. And Shaun will be able to talk more to that because Shaun, was there for every recording of every voice actor. He worked with the company Trigger that did all of the design and everything and the animation. And it's really cool because you hold it over every page and, KRS-One reads, and it was cool being, having written it, all of a sudden you've got Rakim reading poetry that you've written and words that were written, in all of this, with all these amazing, Common and KRS-One. And anyway, like I said, Shaun can, is Shaun in here?
Yeah, he just got in here.
Okay, great. So I'm going to jump off. Shaun,
so you did the writing, right?
So I wrote and produced the graphic novel with Will I Am for Black Eyed Peas as a Black Eyed Peas project. Shaun came in once the book was done and created scans of every page. So when you hold the phone over it, the book comes to life. There's a whole audio, there's and there's the visuals and all that kind of fun stuff. And I also worked on the VR side. Shaun, there was a different team that worked on doing VR. I worked with those guys. That's on the Oculus. You can get the first chapter, I think, free on Oculus, Masters of the Sun. But yeah, it was a really great project. It came out in 2017, I think 2017. And then Shaun and I just recently did something, because Taboo and I have our company Skyview Way, and we did this book, the Marvel 1000. We did one page in Marvel 1000. And so we wanted to kind of try a little, a test with that. And so Shaun designed and did all that. And Red Wolf's mouth opens and closes and he sings and all sorts of stuff is coming out at you. And it's really fun. But I love the technology. I love the VR technology as well. Shaun's doing some really cool stuff in VR right now, and just in app design and building. And he also comes from the game space, and he's just really got a really cool body of work. And I just can't wait to you guys to meet him. So I'm gonna jump.
Perfect.
Love y'all.
We'll bring people from the Oculus and the VR team another day. Today,
yeah, that'd be really cool. Cool.
So we'll work on that. Maybe we'll bring in other people from the team, right? So today's Shaun, and
well, yeah. I mean, look, I think
Yeah.
for Master of the Sun, we'll talk about this, but Shaun's got a lot of other cool stuff that he's working
He's got
on.
cool stuff.
Yeah, and we'll just jump into it. So I'm out. Peace.
All right, peace. All right, here we go. We're getting Shaun on here. There we go. 1 second, one at a time. Shaun's unable to join. I don't know why. Shaun, you must request in. Hello, Shaun. Hello. Say hello, Daz. How are you? Art is on here. We've got Cedra. You can correct me how I say your name. I'm trying here. Let's try to get Shaun on here. Unable to join. Shaun, you have to scroll up to the top and press request. So like scroll up to the top of the comments and then press the little request button. That's how we do it here. We're gonna request on. So we're gonna be talking about AR, VR, Masters of the Sun, all kinds of cool projects with Shaun Ballywell. Go check him out. We're gonna be live here in a second. It says unable to join, so Shaun, you've got to request in. It's at the top. But we're good. How's everybody else doing today? I'm doing well. I'm rating this. We've got Jam Nation tonight while Shaun's finding the little request in button. Shaun, just scroll up to the top, like scroll the comments. Cool. And if it doesn't work, switch phones because you've got two phones. So switch phones. That's how I always do it, is switch the phones and then get on it. Yeah, log in, log out, close the tab, go back in. It's always a turn off, turn on type of thing. So we've got Jam Nation here tonight. And we're going to get Shaun on here. So that's Jam Nation tonight, 9 p.m. PST, 12 a.m. Eastern. Hey!
Hey, guys.
We got you on here.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had the chat going on my desktop, which doesn't let you join via that. So I had to get it up on this phone so I could, yeah.
It's all good. It's all good. These are the complications of modern day technology.
Yes, the future is here and it is having technical difficulties.
Right? It's always like a strange thing, like, how do we do this? How are we getting on there? Like, and then we solve it with like analog ways to just like make, soften the light. Sometimes the analog way works. You just never know. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you working on? What's exciting for you?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on. This is fun to do. I like having these kind of little chats and conversations, talk about what's going on in the worlds of tech, art, and music, all those fun things they're just so much fun to talk about and how they intersect in particular. I am mainly a producer, project manager in the software space, especially focusing in emerging technologies. I've done a lot with augmented and virtual reality type projects. I started out in educational game design, where I did some educational projects fresh out of school and had some traction there, doing some things like marketing and language learning programs, building 3D simulations to help give an immersive feel to these types of educational programs.
Oh, sweet. What were people learning? What kind of...
So one of my favorite things to talk about from that whole period was one of my earliest things that really started out getting me passionate about the whole power that interaction can have in the field of education was the marketing sim I mentioned. This is a game that I designed and programmed and built when I was in my younger days, in like the mid-20s kind of thing, working with a team of artists to provide the 3D assets. It was a 6-player marketing simulation intended for classroom use. So 6 teams essentially would do it. It was a competitive game where each team is trying to research, design, and then market and sell a backpack. So the game had multiple different kind of digital stations you could check in on. There was a demographic station where you would learn about the people who were buying backpacks, do some market research kind of thing. There was a station where you design your backpack. You could change out the straps, the color, the features it had, like does it have a water bottle or no kind of thing on the side, all these different little features. Then you'd also select your retail outlets that you were trying to sell the backpack through and create a marketing program by selecting what channels you're advertising in and how much money you're investing in your kind of outgoing communications. Then the simulation would kind of weigh all that. It would decide what features does your backpack have, what channels you're advertising in, where are you selling it, how does that equate to how many backpack units you sold this turn. And it was a turn-based game, and each turn basically ran the simulation, crunched it, and figured out who sold the most backpacks. So the goal at the end of the simulation was to have made the most money, had a successful marketing campaign. And one of the things that was really interesting about it was that there wasn't a single strategy that worked. Depending on what everyone else was doing, what the competitive landscape was, you had to kind of find your niche to be successful in the backpack market. So that was a really fun project that got some good traction. It was for McGraw-Hill, who then ended up picking up 3 or 4 more simulations from the company. So it was the first in a flagship or in a line of products that we ended up developing for them. Went on to do government operations and language learning programs for McGraw-Hill in the same kind of vein. And that was really fun. That was a good time. Yeah.
What did you learn for language learning in your time working on that? Like, what did you learn, like, for, I guess that's like people picking up a second language, or is that like coding language, or?
No, that was Spanish and French in particular. So that was intended for high school students. Mm-hmm. We built one simulation that it was a 3D cityscape kind of thing, and then the architectural details we put on to the buildings could be swapped out to be either a French-ish city or a Spanish-ish city, just like the details to make it feel like it was in the right place. And then, it was a conversational language learning game. So you had a character, you'd walk around, there were NPCs around the town that you could talk to. They'd give you little quests. And the quest would be like, go order a basket of apples from the fruit market kind of thing. So it was opportunities to engage in that entry-level language learning in a diegetic context where it kind of felt like, okay, I'm here, I have a purpose of why I'm using this language, and then tried to re-encourage those concepts.
Did you do anything with the apples? Like, like you had to put them on someone's head and like shoot a thing off of it, off someone's head?
Not really. It was mainly, since the whole focus of it was focusing on that language learning game, the mechanics were all centered around conversation.
Okay.
Though there were some minor other like mini games we built to kind of do things. There was a stealth mini game we did where you were trying to it was polite refusals kind of things was the subject area. So we did a concept where you had to try and get across town, and we had a stealth mechanic so you could like walk behind people and that sort of thing, that old school Metal Gear Solid type stealth mechanic. But if somebody saw you and came over and talked to you, your options then were to say like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in a hurry, or I need to go, or I have a doctor's appointment. And it was all those kind of polite refusal subject matter area that let this mini game kind of engage in that period of language in an actual context. With the other one that we like to talk about being a diner dash kind of thing, where you took the role of actually the customers at the restaurant ordering food, and you'd have to say like, do you have this? Can you offer me that? I would like it in this way kind of thing. And it's that language of being at a restaurant, but you still had to try and kind of get the most tables served and do those time management level activities that you see in that kind of restaurant game.
Interesting. Did you ever try to give people food while they're like sitting at that table?
Well, delivering the food was part of the mini game that you played, because you're talking about like controlling a character in a 3D environment. So you could go like get the wrong dish and bring it to a table, and they would be like, this isn't my order, and you'd have to choose like, I'm sorry, I'll get the right one, and those kind of conversational mechanics that you might see play out.
Oh, so then you also plays the waiter?
Yeah. Well, you control the waiter, but you have to like the conversation mini game. In Diner Dash, you just click on the table and it's done. Like deliver food, click, 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 click. It's just clicking things. Ours does have a little like conversation mini game each time you come to the table, where there's like a fill in the blank, and you have to go a little easy on me. This was about 15 years ago at this point that I'm trying to remember exactly how this mini game works.
Now? What would be like your ultimate, like if you could revamp this now, what would you do? That would like, with modern technology, what would you do to revamp this thing? Like what's one scenario that you could imagine?
That's a great question. Even integrating virtual reality into it would be a great example. You could see how virtual reality in particular would be a fantastic learning language simulator. You could be sitting at a restaurant on the river in Italy, and then someone comes up and orders from you, and you go, yes, please bring me the food. And you get to have that kind of, so much of that experience of being in like a beautiful foreign country and just doing it and order, even if you are sitting in a restaurant ordering and having those, there's so much beauty and culture involved in that experience that you could recreate in the VR setting to give that level of importance to the language. And that emotional connection to learning the language is what's going to help drive people to stay successful at it. So that's one of the really exciting things about, from kind of moving into talking about what VR does and augmented reality does, is it really helps establish that emotional connection to the experience that you're having. And since that is such an important driver of people's learning experiences, is do I feel invested in this emotionally? Leveraging that power to create that connection to what the learning material is what allows virtual reality to be such a powerful training and learning tool. Yeah.
So what do you feel is the most important thing for people to learn?
In general?
Like what's yeah,
I do have an answer to that.
The most powerful emotional tool to like teach people. What would you like people to learn?
Well, honestly, I think the most important thing that people can learn is how to learn. I think for the future, even how we evaluate people's intelligence is going to be changing. It's not going to be a how much do I know concept. It's going to be how quickly can I learn it. And with the world's most powerful resource of the internet available for everyone now, kids coming up in this age, it's less memory. Even in our age, it was kind of like memorization was on the way down. And when you're like, wait, I don't get to use my notes for this test, what's the point? It felt silly and out of place already. But these days, it's just completely anachronistic to expect someone not to have resources available while doing any given task. So I think all of that, like the way that people even learn, is the most important thing for people to learn. How does VR teach that? That's a good question. I don't know if that's necessarily
where I'm going.
Yeah. I don't know if that's necessarily the subject that VR would be particularly useful for.
Or could it? We're sitting here in the imagination space. It's the freedom tapestry, it's freedom to think about these things, right? So we're here. If it were, how could it?
Well,
you didn't
honestly,
expect this question here today.
But I think that's a great question. And to that, I would go back to saying that games themselves, I think, are a great way of how we drive the love of learning within people. So why educational games are powerful, all these things are all so wrapped up and tightly wound, because when you talk about how do you make a fun game, you make the learning curve for it feel very natural, that people feel like they're doing really well immediately, but they still are learning new things and getting better at it. And then when they get to the top end, they feel like there's lots of room for them to dig in and really invest themselves in that kind of content. So there's so much overlap between game design and educational pedagogy that has similar concepps. So I really believe in the power of video games at a young age to foster the desire of learning. I've learned so much through games over the years. Exactly. I've got my giant shelf of board games back here.
Oh yeah.
You gotta stay invested and have all these interests and stay hungry for knowledge. And I think games and technology in general both do a lot to foster that hunger within people. So the intersection of them, yeah. What's
one thing, because I feel like what you mentioned is kind of this idea of like the gamification of of learning. Is there one piece of like idea that you're excited about in the gamification of learning? I mean, that's what it sounds like to me that you're talking about. what's one thing, or like a simple way to maybe describe it to the audience, and one thing that you're excited about within that?
I don't know if I really have like one particular product or like thing out there that I could point at and say, look what they're doing, it's great. You know, I think there's a lot of people, and there have been for a long time, who have been doing things in this realm. You know, you can look back to the kind of educational games that were so impactful to my generation, even down to like Oregon Trail or the Investigator series where you like walked around a school and had to find the haunted robots. If I can't even remember, Mystery Mansion or something like that. You know, those kind of games that had a loosely educational component but were just kind of fun to them. All of those sorts of things are critical. In modern age, you can see lots of companies doing that. Like I know of one called, I think ABC Mouse is one that's local here in Los Angeles that's doing, trying to create those childhood-focused educational game products. But all of them, I think in general, are just a healthy thing to have.
Cool. Yeah. So let's get into some of your work here for a bit. You sent me some images. Let's see what we got here. Let's start out over here. We're gonna start off. I guess it makes a square, but it cuts it off. So
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so this is a little smorgasbord of 3 different projects that I've worked on in the past. In the center there is the Masters of the Sun. That's the cover of the comic book. You can see I got it on my lap right here. To the left is a video project that I did for the LA Auto Show, where it was the imagination of what the Olympics would be like in the future, especially focusing on para athletes, as in, like you can see in her, she's only got one leg there. The other one's a cybernetic enhancement, essentially, or a replacement. It's a digital leg, so a physical. God, what's the word I'm looking for right here? The actress that we actually, or the athlete that we hired to do that part, even though it was an animated video, we hired an actual person named Scout Bassett. She's a Paralympian, and we used her image and created this whole Games of the Future 2020, or not 2020, that's right now, 2040 or something like that, imagination, where there was all these different games and people were using their replacement limbs and things in interesting creative ways to create this new future of games. And then on the right hand, that is an augmented reality experience that I did for CES, I think 2016, where you wore ODG R9 augmented reality headset, and you walked into a room that was decorated like a med bay on a spaceship, like from the Alien movie franchise. And when you walked in, you would start hearing over the comms your kind of contact on the spaceship telling you, look around, search for some clues. So as you're wearing the headset and you scan the room, it might pick up like biosigns. There was a blood splash on the wall that if they looked at it, it would go like, unknown biosign detected. Then after you had identified a couple of clues, it triggered a hollow memory. If you remember seeing in Prometheus, there was that kind of white pixelated aliens that were running around the station. So we took that visual look and recreated the chestburster scene from the original Alien in that kind of hollow memory look. So basically the storyline was that you, the space explorer, came into this med bay, found some clues that triggered a playback of what happened here, where an alien attack occurred and the chestburster burst through. And you got to see all of that play out in an augmented reality setting, so it was like happening in the room with you in that kind of digital real setting. So that was also.
So you're wearing a head. Like, how are you exploring the space? Like, do you have a headset on, or what do you have?
Yeah, well, so speaking of the images, do you have the other one there of that project, the Alien
I have
one?
you.
Yes. So that is the Osterhout Design Group R9 smart glasses there. You can see the augmented reality content is kind of digitally. This is a manipulated photograph to put the stuff that I was seeing into the image that you can see it too. But you can see there it is.
This is a mixed reality photograph, right?
This is a altered photograph.
Altered photograph. Just
Yeah.
Altered.
Yeah. Because like basically the photograph was me standing there wearing the headset, right? That's a smart glasses like HoloLens kind of concept there. Okay. The content that's floating in front of my face wasn't really there.
Right.
It's what I was seeing through the augmentation.
Perfect. We're just trying to understand what's happening. Okay.
So yeah, that's the equipment that people will be wearing. It's just that thin little glasses concept, and then they'd be able to see the scene play out on their screen as if it was really there, but it's not.
Cool. And is this like a HoloLens type of thing?
Yeah, they were augmented reality smart glasses.
Okay.
Osterhout Design Group, who was the designer of that particular headset, they closed their doors. They're out of business. They had some technical issues. You can see in that image, those are actually decently smart looking if you compare it to like good old Google Glass kind of thing. ODG had a definite like design goal for their prosthetic. That is exactly the word I was looking for. Thank you. It took me so long to read that. I don't know why I couldn't think of prosthetic.
Yeah, art's on it.
But yes, they tried to make it cooler looking, essentially. But unfortunately, their goal of minimizing it all and making this small, compact glasses that could keep up technically with what some of the other devices were doing kind of fizzled out, and they weren't able to really create the product that they were able to do. So they shut their doors, but before they did, we built this product for them.
Sweet. Were you before we go on? Oh my God, I just have all these photos.
Yeah.
Were you able to take this on to like a new thing, or did it just like stay stuck in this thing that kind of like went off? Like, are you able to go on with some of these projects even if the technology or the piece goes away?
Well, this one in particular was a focused demo for the Consumer Electronics Summit in particular. So it was only about a 5-minute long experience that people were doing while at the tech show in Las Vegas. And since, unfortunately, the company didn't continue on, we didn't end up doing anything further with this particular engagement.
Cool. I mean, it is what it is, right? You learned what did you learn from this project?
This one was particularly interesting on the technical side of things. I mentioned that they didn't really manage to get their stuff figured out and ended up shutting the doors as a company not too long after we launched this demo. But the goal of the project was to really showcase the power of the R9 smart glasses over their older model, the R7. So when we kicked off the project about 6 months or so before the actual show, we were always being told, you'll get the R9 smart glasses and be able to develop on that particular piece of hardware. However, up until 2 weeks before the show, we still had never actually received a functioning unit. So we were developing the entire experience on older hardware right up until right before the show.
Wow.
Now, when we did try and run on, and what that meant is the whole time we were doing production, it wasn't really running as well as we would like it to. And typically when we're creating this type of experience, if you're a month before the actual show and things aren't running, you start cutting. You're like, we got to get down to where this runs smoothly. But since we were planning on having more hardware power, essentially, we were kind of just trying to say, well, maybe this will be okay. Maybe we're in that area of, with the better hardware, this will function correctly. So we didn't really do as much kind of that optimization before we got into the point of no return zone right before the show. So come show day, guess what? The devices were not sufficiently powered to now be able to have a noticeable performance increase over the other device. And we're having all kinds of hardware problems at the show floor. We literally had, I think, 6 total devices to run the demo on. But they could only go through the demo about 2 times before the device itself got so hot that we had to take it off because it was uncomfortable. And then we put a cold soda can on top of it to cool it down so that it could be ready to go again in about 10 minutes after having been cooled down. So the learnings from this project, there was a lot of learnings from this project, one of which I just don't ever want to work with hardware that doesn't exist again. Like, I'm never going to fall into that trap of them saying, oh, it'll be ready, when there's just no promise. It's like, I won't start working on something unless you can tell me I can actually work on the hardware that I'm going to be able to use down the line. 2, it's that you can't rely on hoping kind of concept. When we got down to that month before the show and it was we knew we were screwed, right? Because it's like, it's not running right now. We know it doesn't work. We have a month left. We could do things to trim and reduce and make a version. It's not going to be the demo that we thought it was going to be, but you haven't delivered the hardware to us yet, so we have to cut, kind of concept. And we probably should have made that choice earlier on and just built for the device that we did have. And you know, that's challenging, because that's the whole point of the product was to showcase the upper end of what it can do. It just turned out the upper end wasn't where we thought it was going to be, and so it was really hard to build an impressive demo. That of course makes us not look good, because we're like, we didn't build the demo, but it's, you know, it was a messy situation all the way around, kind of, at that point.
Wow, that's so amazing to have that experience, and then to be able to walk away with the lessons that you learned like that, because it seems like those are some pretty big lessons that can be applied to many more things.
It was definitely a huge learning experience. And I think it was for everybody involved, which is why when it was kind of said and done, and we had our post-client meetings and everything, even us as an agency and them as the Fox Studios kind of thing, nobody was like disappointed necessarily, because everyone kind of understood what happened with the production process leading up to that point. We've been very communicative. So if you're looking for production processes lessons, there's that too, is make sure that if you are seeing these red flags ahead of time, that you're communicating that all around and making sure, like, look, we know that we're accepting this risk, but that does mean the risk is there. You still want to tell people that, so that when things do go wrong, you can say, well, you know, we tried. That was a level of risk we accepted. Unfortunately, the bad case happened, but we all knew that was a possibility. So
how did you communicate that? Like, did you have them like sign things, or like, do you just like have meetings and are like, first thing on the agenda, like, this may not work? Like,
yeah, part of it is, I mean, you're working with these people day in and day out, typically, especially if things are kind of a little rocky. You're giving them more information. Oh, hey, Nicole. So part of it is just building up that relationship with people, that they have that level of trust in you. You know, if you're demonstrating a high level of skill and a high level of expertise throughout the entire production process, if the result isn't necessarily where everyone hoped it would end up in, you still have that level of trust built up where you can say, yeah, some things may have gone wrong, but that's not because we didn't do a high level of quality of work. We understand where some of the problems were, but you know, you have trust in us. We've built up that relationship, so you understand how it's going.
So so that kept like the relationships good even after the project, or to whatever degree. We can move on. I'm just like curious. Like this, it's really interesting to like learn from things, you know, that went different directions, and then I think these are nice lessons to be, you know, that I'm able to learn from, you know, what you learned from, as well as the audience is able to learn those same lessons. And I think that's something, like, even if someone's not working on AR, VR technology, those are still lessons that can apply to many more people.
Yeah.
So
yep.
I
hope so. Yeah.
No, I think it is. I think so. Give us some thumbs up in the comments there. What's going on here?
So this is, as I mentioned, kind of that hollow memory scene. Sorry, my wife is just like trying to see what was going on. There's a hollow memory scene. This is what I was talking about, how the chest burster scene is playing out. So this is another kind of modified photograph to try and give the idea of what's happening in augmented reality. So the characters that you kind of see playing out here, there's a guy laying on a medical bed. There's someone else kind of looking over them. They've got their hand on their chest right now. And it's a little hard to tell because it's kind of that it was a scanning effect almost, where the line would go up and down and you'd see like better resolution, like that kind of old school VCR thing going on. We played a lot with the shaders to get this look kind of looking just right, but it was a living kind of view to it. But it played out that kind of scene where the chest burster then came out of his chest and like looked around, and then it actually, once the model came out here, it would get out on the floor and like scurry past you, and the user was intended to see that happen and follow it. And while this was the hollow memory kind of style to it, the chest burster memory thing would go down, and you would basically see the feet of the fully rendered xenomorph standing there, and then you'd look up and see it like standing right in your face, and then it did the "Rah!" thing right in your face at the end, and that's how the demo ended, is you got attacked by like a realistic looking xenomorph right in your face.
Oh my God. How did people react to that?
Oh, people had a good time with it. People screamed, for sure. It was really fun.
Is that like kind of like the end result, is you want that emotional connection? Is that one of those things that you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this one was entertainment focused. We weren't really trying to scare people into learning necessarily. I mean, except the learning goal was that this is a cool product, so there's still a learning element there, I suppose. But yeah, trying to use the technology to create that emotional experience there to give a positive feeling through fear.
What's something that you learned from this?
Well, I kind of talked about the production process things from that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe we should jump on to the next project there.
We can jump on this one, or we can
Yeah.
jump on this one.
Yeah, so there we go. Let's talk about Masters of the Sun, right?
Yeah,
That's
let's
kind
talk
of
about Masters of the Sun. We
the
gotta.
goal.
Yeah. Tell me when to move on. I'm just like.
That's good.
hitting
Yeah, so it was fun. I like talking about the Alien Project, but here we go. Let's get to the Masters of the Sun. This was fun. I think Ben gave a little bit of an overview about the kind of project from start to finish, how it kind of was. So what kind of questions might you have about what went on here?
What first of all, what did you do on this project? Like, what was your role? Who were the team players? What happened with this? I mean, for everybody who doesn't know about the Masters of the Sun project, maybe you could like summarize it quickly, and then we can get into some of like how it went down.
Sure, yeah, that's a great idea. So I worked on this project for probably about 1.5 years, close to 2 years, in various aspects. I, at the time, was employed by Trigger Global, who was the agency that contracted with will.i.am to produce this content for them. So I was assigned as the project manager, team lead for the foreseeable project.
For the AR experience.
Right.
Okay.
So
because there was a comic book, there was a VR. There's so there's the album, there's a comic book, there's an AR experience, and then there's a VR experience.
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
I'm just checking in.
Yeah, Ben basically did the production and writing of the graphic novel itself, while I worked almost exclusively on the augmented reality. But there were some also, I mean, that's the things that launched. There were some things that we experimented with that we never even actually launched, like an augmented reality Pokemon Go style game. We did prototypes of that and all kinds of fun things along that line.
For Masters of the Sun, there was supposed to. They were thinking about doing a game version.
Yes, we got pretty far on that process of actually developing a prototype for that game. Yeah.
What would you be looking for? Yeah, tell us a little bit about what didn't launch, because that's kind of cool.
Well, that was probably the main thing that didn't launch. We spent quite a bit of time and energy both producing the prototype as well as shopping it around to some like partners, capital funds kind of things to look to get financing for it. But it was really kind of, this was at the time where Pokemon Go was about 1 year old and was still kind of dominating everything. People were like, what's the next AR game that's going to be the next Pokemon Go? And we can talk a bit about why I don't think Pokemon Go even necessarily is an AR game. It's more of a geolocation-based game.
Right.
But the idea in Will's head was to take this kind of content and create a location-based game that people could go out into the world, go to locations, fight zombies there, see through the veil to this other world kind of concept, where you were like opening portals to the Masters of the Sun universe and the zombies were coming through and you had to kind of fight them off as they're trying to get into our world from this one.
So you're talking about, okay, so Ben said that Liam showed Will Pokemon. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting how these little things work out. So you're talking about, instead of like, because that's a geolocation based game, that it's actually an AR based game instead of geolocation based.
It was both, right? So
okay.
Much like Pokemon Go does have an AR component where you can see the Pokemon here kind of thing,
Right.
and then throw the Pokeballs at it. Our game had a similar, but ours was actually a bit more involved with the augmented reality game component. We'd have basically a shooting gallery where the zombies were spawning in the area around you and coming at you, and you had to like turn and blast them, kind of thing. Which actually, if you have the boombox gun image and want to put that up right now,
yeah, I have the boombox right here.
this
right?
is one of the guns that we prototyped for this experience. So even though this never actually launched, we did get as far as designing some new weapons. If I have very little hope that anybody is actually familiar with the details of this graphic novel, but in the storyline, the different characters collect these weapons of power and use the weapons of power, unite them to defeat APEP. So part of our augmented reality game is we designed additional weapons of power for the user to collect, augment, and have this gaming experience around. So you would choose which of these kind of master weapons you would use, and then for like this one, for example, you'd be shooting out like shockwave blasts that hit the aliens and turn them back into essence and kind of blast them away.
Interesting. How does
so,
this
yeah.
play into the audio from the Masters of the Sun? I'm kind of curious, like how you reinterpreted this like audio track, and then you're like, okay, there's this comic book, there's this audio track.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to, bring this to life?
Well, that's funny. If you remember from the previous project, learning lessons about not starting things without all the stuff available, we actually built all of this before the album came out. We didn't have any audio.
Because they didn't want to release to anybody, even the people on the team.
Yeah, we didn't have the album at all. In fact, I've still never heard the vast majority of the album. I never got it at all. There's a soundtrack portion of the app. There's a soundtrack portion of the app that we actually never even connected. It's still to this day, if you buy the app and download it, it says soundtrack coming soon, which I think was a rights issue, is that who owned Masters of the Sun, the album, versus who owned Masters of the Sun, the app. And Will owned the app, but I think Interscope owned the music. So we were never actually able to combine them.
Interesting. So Ben said something interesting right now. He said it's on Spotify. So we're just going to see Masters of the Sun.
That's going to be the album, not the...
Right.
So I do want to like play one thing here for you, because I've got the app running, and
you got the app running. Oh yeah, let's do that.
This is a perfect example though, because it's so appropriate to your question, and hopefully you guys can hear this a little bit. So you see on this page, what's going on is the heroes have found an ice cream truck, basically, and it crashes in front of them kind of randomly, and this drug comes spilling out the back. It's called Z-Drops, and it's what's turning everybody into zombies. So they basically just stumble upon a cache of drugs here. But so when I do the augmented reality version of it, there's an actual 3D model of the van that's going to come into play. Hopefully I'm doing this okay here.
Yeah, just hold it still. Oh.
So you can see the 3D model of the van kind of crashed on the page there. But just as important, if you can hear the audio, this is a custom track that Will wrote for this page. So we didn't have the Masters of the Sun music, but he did do basically a custom start to finish soundtrack for the entire book just for this. So all the music in here is based on what they were doing, but entirely separate, more content. The amount of content in this book that people have not seen is insane. Like, I mean, it's 180 pages of fully voice acted by A-list celebrities production, like 20 different actors, like Queen Latifah, not Jay-Z, I don't know, lots of people. It was insane what the cast list was. It's disappointing to me that so few people have ever actually experienced the AR app because of how much effort and production value there is to it.
And the musicians. Yeah.
The musicians are in there. Oh, crap, I just...
Right? Rosario Dawson.
Rosario Dawson. Oh, she was so sweet and nice. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben, feel free to add some people down there. So...
Mike Rapaport.
Okay.
I want to talk about Mike Rapaport real quick in particular, just because another music relation thing here. This page here is a scene where one of basically the characters, the heroes, is this group of established musicians who are in LA doing a show, and then there's some newbies that come up and try and get in with them and get good. And the newbies are, in this scene, coming up to the established musicians and trying to make a good impression. So the guy that plays Jimmy here is Mike Rapaport, who's a mid-range celebrity. I think, a lot of people would recognize his face, but probably not recognize his name. But when he came into the studio with Will and the crew, he doesn't know how to rap at all. He's a white boy actor guy, not a musician whatsoever. So Will had to work with him and get him to spit these bars essentially and make it sound good. And we played in the studio for about a day.
I spit about all sorts of shit, not just pussy.
Bad word.
About real life. I think we have different definitions of real
So here he's going to spit.
Let me show you how real we are. I keep a Caballero while I'm counting on my euros. Swimming in these zeros, gold looking like a pharaoh. Fresh to the marrow, call me Jimmy like De Niro. Got women lining up all the way to De Janeiro.
So, we had him come in. We played with the beat a little bit to find something that he could kind of keep up with. Tried to fine-tune it. Fine-tune it so he sounded like he was actually, somewhat competent and able to be convincingly enough.
And Ben wrote the words.
An entry rapper. Yeah. He wrote a lot of bad words. Yeah, because I know, at the beginning there, he says the P word.
Right.
But it's not.
Right. This is like a rated R kind of comic book here.
There's boobies in it.
And Art said, he asked, what if the app were standalone? Is it a standalone app?
It is a standalone app, yeah.
Okay. So were you working on the coding, or what? You were project manager? What sorts of things, and how big was the team? Tell us a little bit of the nitty-gritty of that.
Okay, yeah. So it was, like I mentioned, almost a 2-year project with a couple different kind of branching things. That game was a whole separate team from the comic. So for a while there was a whole other group of people. You do need the comic book. Yeah, sorry. So, but that's kind of the nature of augmented reality is you can't put stuff on top of the thing unless you have the thing. So it's hard to make a standalone. But
you can also have it on an iPad, right? You can
do if you want to do screen to screen, you could do
screen to screen.
Yeah.
Right.
And we could also.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that in a second too, because one of the concepts we did talk about was basically an animated book that kind of all the pop-outs would just happen in screen space, and you don't have to have the second screen pointing at it kind of concept. And we talked a little bit about that and decided ultimately not to do it, or I think our contact on the Black Eyed Peas side was going to look into other people to kind of produce that experience, and I don't think it ever actually came to fruition.
Wait, what would have that experience been?
Well, if you talk about looking at the comic book on an iPad, right? There's an iPad version of it where you can scroll through, but taking what we did with the augmented reality and integrating it with a digital comic book, so each of the speech bubbles might highlight and pop up just within the screen space itself on the iPad, and you don't need a secondary augmented thing to make that kind of experience happen. Right. But like I said, we never actually ended up doing that, so it wasn't something we explored.
Oh, that would be interesting if you could actually place the book in augmented reality and then scroll over it.
Yeah. Would
that be cool? Or
that would be interesting. It's a lot of a lot of digital content.
Right.
That's I don't know. It never actually occurred to me to place a marker in AR that the AR would then augment. That's an interesting concept. I don't really know if that would work or not.
You can come back to me. We can talk about this. No. I've been working with my art for a while and just placing markers on it, and then I do videos of my artwork in virtual space. I don't know. I mean, it's the way that I can interact with augmented reality as an artist. And so I'm personally interested in that space. How can I mess as an artist? What are the easiest ways for me to mess with reality?
Yeah, so it was great because we can revisit your first question just real quick about team size, because that gets into it, and then talk a little about the tools, and I can tell you about how easy it really is. So for this team, like I mentioned, because it was 180 pages and we did such a full start to finish thing with thousands of lines of audio that were recorded and tracked and all that stuff, we did have a bit of a bigger team. I had 3 programmers working full-time on it with 1 art director. We contracted some additional production art to kind of cut up all the pages and all that stuff. And we hired some audio engineers to produce sound effects. We had a game design consultant for a while for the game portion. And then, like I mentioned, because the game thing was its own thing, it had 2 full-time programmers on it. The same art director worked on both of those things at the same time, but there was a 5-engineer project for a time while we were doing both of those. So that's mainly, though, because of the content needs that we had were so big. As far as what one person can accomplish on their own, it's also pretty impressive. Ben mentioned the Marvel one-pager that we did for them. That was just something that I personally, 100% by myself, including doing the production art, cutting out all the images.
This one?
Yes, putting it into Unity, animating the assets themselves, and exporting it, putting it into an app, and giving it to them so they could take it to their pitch and show off the concept. And I did it all in about 2 days.
Wow.
It's a lot easier than I think people would think. Mainly, I like to use Unity to develop augmented reality applications. It's not the only solution, but it is a great, powerful tool that is ubiquitous, and virtually every company that does augmented reality does use Unity in some way, shape, or form. So for this one, I personally created a Unity project, loaded that art asset into it. To actually get the augmented reality running is very straightforward. You basically put an augmented reality camera in the scene. That's just like an object that has already existed. You drag and drop it in, and you point it at the thing you want it to be pointed at. That basically says, this is the camera that the person's holding, right? If they look at the target, recognize that.
Right.
So you add your augmented reality camera, you designate that the image is a target for it to look for, and then you just kind of place your models and things in relation to that target. So all the 2D art assets, I had the image here, and I said, okay, be 100 pixels ahead of that in space. And then that's how you kind of place everything. To actually animate the assets and make them move in time, Unity has a timeline feature where you've got, say you want to build a 30-second animation, which I think is about how long this was. You might have 360 frames on your timeline, and at any point in time, you can create a new keyframe where something changes. So, for example, for his mouth flapping, when this image was scanned, he's got that big old wide open mouth. I had that head kind of float forward off the page while the mouth drifted closed. And then when the lyrics started singing, I had his mouth just kind of do this and just lip flap open in time with the words. So, I found when was the first beat of words actually happening, and it was like 10 seconds into the animation. So at 600 frames for 60 FPS, I went in, I created a new keyframe, and I said, okay, cool. Then I knew when that time was up, I'm going to want it, roughly 6 inches off the page. So I dragged its Y value out this far to 500 pixels, something like that, and I set it there. Then the system itself does the tween, the in-between stages. It's called the tween in animation. Right. And you basically just hit go, and it says, all right, well, I know it starts here, and 10 seconds later, it's here. So it just goes, okay. Boom. First 10 seconds, my animation done, just like that. Wow. The lip flap works in a similar way. Unity actually has a whole system where you can build stretch and skew kind of animations for 2D art, just like you can for 3D models. You build a skeleton for them, and then you move those around, and it changes the art. So for this guy, for example, I had his kind of whole upper head be one piece of art. It didn't really shift around a lot. So his eyes, nose, all that stuff was one asset. The 2 sidebars were each one individual asset, and then the bottom of his jaw was one individual asset with all the black background. So I had those shrink and contract so they were only about 2 pixels tall when he wasn't talking, and then just stretch their bones so that they were this long when his mouth was open. And then I just, at the times, depending on whether there was audio for the lyrics or not, I just flapped his mouth. And then he just, he did the in time with the words kind of concept. And it was cool because he's not really a real character. He didn't need to have fine-tuned lip functionality. Just him flapping his mouth in time for the music was fine. And then I did the same thing for all the little characters around the side. I made them, pop off, do a little boxing animation or something. The guy on the side, he threw cards out and they would fly out towards you. The people on the top, they waved their flags around and were like, "Yay, woo!" and just like little tiny animations for all the separate characters that played out while the music was playing, kind of thing. And like I said, all that work was about 2 days.
Custom 3D models for each of them?
No, it's just the 2D sprite. So I literally this image. I had no other content other than the image we're looking at right now.
Okay.
I cut out the wolf head in Photoshop, just traced around it. So I had that isolated image.
Okay.
Cut out his jaw, so that was an isolated image. And I basically worked with those pieces as the two main things that I was doing. So they're just 2D assets sitting there in space. Unity's tools is the thing that lets me say, this is a bone, this is a bone, this is a bone, and these can stretch or not stretch. And then it's just a process of me dragging it down and dragging it. Once I kind of set it up so it knows how this thing moves because I built a skeleton for it, I'll say, this is rigid, these are flexible, shift. Done.
Interesting. So you didn't even need to, you could make 3D models for it in like full 3D skeletons, but you didn't need to. So it's just how to simply show it in like 2D animations from the 2D page and then pop them off to different levels and do.
In Masters of the Sun, for example, we did a lot of 2D animation with all the speech bubbles coming off the page. That was, they're moving in 3D space because they're kind of coming at you, and the scene is a 3-dimensional scene. But those were just 2-dimensional assets. They're cutouts from the image put on a 0-pixel wide thing that it was just floating in space. If you were to look at the side of it, you wouldn't see anything. It has no depth.
No doubt.
But we also did use 3D assets, like you saw in the ice cream one, where the actual truck came around and crashed. There was a 3D model of an ice cream truck that did that. For compelling augmented reality in a physical space where you want it to look like an object is on the table, you're going to be using 3D assets. But to do fun animations and things, especially if you're using an augmentation of an existing image, you can do a lot of animation strategy with bare bones tools, just using Unity and creating these fun experiences.
What's the quickest way to deploy this for people? Do you have to have an app store thing?
You do?
Go through all that, or what's that?
That's interesting. There's a complicated answer to that. For example, this project that I did with Ben and Taboo, it was never actually released to the public. So I only ever said, build to my personal phone or build to their personal phone and put it on their device, and they went off in the world and did it for their demo, and that was fine. If I did actually want to release it to the App Store, there's a bit more of a complicated process where you have to have your Apple developer account and make sure you have it a license and it's all signed off, and there is some expenses related to being in that program. And it's a little more complicated. You probably need an engineer to really get through that process, unless you're particularly hands-on DIY kind of person.
Right. So interesting. So definitely it would have its own app. So from Unity, you'd publish through an app, through the App Store and go through that process.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. Let's see what other images we have here.
Sure.
So what is this?
Okay.
We only have 2 minutes remaining. So we can do this.
This is one of the bad guys from the augmented reality shooting game. So these are the zombie thugs that would charge at you and try and rip your face off in that not launched Master of the Sun zombie shooting game I talked about.
Sweet. And this is?
This is one of the pages from Master of the Sun. So this is an example. This is a... Are you there? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Here, what we augmented was that the guy in the middle there, that's Master Sun. He would come off the page. Those laser beams would circle around him. There was a graphical effect of him gathering power and telling this story. He's giving the intro to what's happening and setting things up and talking a little bit about the cultural issues that the book also focuses on.
Cool.
So just an example of one of the pages.
So we have 1 minute left. Last words. I'm going to say we have the Jam Nation tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Freedom Tapestry Project. We do this about every week. Last words are all yours. We got 40 seconds left. Anything
Okay, sorry.
you'd like to say to the audience?
Nah, that's good. Sorry, you cut out right at the end there, but this has been a whole lot of
yeah.
fun. So thanks for having me on and chatting with me about all this good stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and getting on here and sharing your learned lessons and
Yeah.
sharing what you've created. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everybody.
All right, take care. Bye.